I'm going to have it here. So, of course, Sunday's the big Christmas production. And so you'll probably hear, those of you here in the dining center, you'll probably hear that tonight because there's a big rehearsal going on upstairs, which is where Pastor Chris is. I'm not telling you which of the characters he will be, but he will be one of the characters. I will tell you he will not be one of the skinny characters. So will you tell him I said that? And so he told me a few weeks ago, he said, Pastor, if you cover that Wednesday night, I'd appreciate it. Now, what's funny is I covered a Wednesday night in November, and he came that night. Whatever chapter I did, I don't remember, I did 6 or 7. He did the same one the next week. We had a lot of fun with that. I told him, obviously, I held him riveted through the whole thing. I won't hold you too long tonight. Yesterday, I got my booster. So I am fully vaxxed and fully boosted. And that's my decision, and I did it. You don't know what's going to happen down the road. I don't know. I just want to be down the road to find out what's going to happen down the road. But, and it's not as bad as the first two. It's, as far as side effects and stuff, it's not as bad as the first two. But I do know that I got it. So anyway, I'll stand up here as long as I can. If I get white and start sweating or something like that, then just, what is it, prop me up by the jukebox or something like that? Is that it? Prop me up by the jukebox or roll me up and smoke me or whatever, Hey, don't forget we are having the Christmas program Sunday, 10:30 and 3 o'clock, and encourage you to be here. We will have a 9 o'clock service. I am scheduled to preach at a 9 o'clock service. It'll be a very quick sermon because they want me to be done so they can get everything ready for 10:30. So that's where we are this week. Had a great senior adult lunch Sunday. I don't know how many of you got to be here, but food was good. The fellowship was good. I went home and I told Jan, we haven't had the opportunity to do this since March of 20. That was the last Sunday senior adult gathering we had, March of 1920, I think. And so a year and a half. And what's really amazing is a year and a half later, the faces of that group has changed. And you think about those who've gone home to be with the Lord, and it's just it's one of those things you think about. But if Ecclesiastes teaches us anything, and that's where I'm at tonight, and I'm in chapter 10, and I've enjoyed the times I've got to fill in for Pastor Chris. And you always learn more teaching than you do listening, by the way. One of the things that I've really taken away from this was where Solomon basically said, it's, vanity of vanities. If you don't enjoy the blessings God has given you, it's really a waste. He talked about everything he had and all the blessings, but vanity of vanities can't enjoy it. If you don't enjoy the blessings God has given you, and so I'm trying to just kind of, when I catch myself being myself, say, wait a minute. God's been too good to be worked up about this or that or anything else. So we're in chapter 10. And in chapter 10 of Ecclesiastes, Solomon is still struggling. It's what I love about Ecclesiastes. I love it when other people struggle. And Solomon is still struggling. He's still trying to come to grips with all this. And what happens to me, and this is all my interpretation tonight, what happens to me in chapter 10 is we see the Solomon of Proverbs sort of show back up. When the chips are down, the old you will show back up. And so you sort of see the Solomon of Proverbs, who wrote all of those wonderful Proverbs as they were given to him by his father. You see that Solomon kind of show back up. Now, he's giving Proverbs, but he's still in an ecclesiastical mood. He's still depressed. He's still struggling. And it's interesting to see these two come together. Overall, Solomon in chapter 10 is struggling with people who do not appreciate their opportunity. You ever wanted to have that conversation with somebody? People who do not appreciate their opportunity. They don't appreciate their influence. And we'll see he'll talk about some people who don't appreciate the position God has placed them in. People who don't recognize what they have and how they influence others. Everybody in this room and everybody watching online influences somebody. When you order at the restaurant in the morning, how you order and treat that server will influence that server in one way or another. Amen. They could already be struggling and you could just pile on. Everybody has some degree of influence. And Solomon's going to note that people don't realize what they have and how it influences others. Some of what I hear him saying is perhaps an older, experienced person who is frustrated by the younger, naive person. Ain't I being nice? There's some things you don't learn until you live it. And so you have a man who has lived through some things in his life, and he seems frustrated that the younger ones going through that now won't listen. Now, y'all don't have any children like that, I know, but or neighbors or anything like that. Perhaps it's the observation of an older generation frustrated with a new younger generation. But there's some interesting proverbs here, and I thought we'd just walk through them and have a little bit of fun. Is that okay? All right, Proverbs 10. Verse 1. This is so good. This is rich. You ready? Dead flies. Now, you know he stayed up all night thinking about this. Have you ever wasted a night thinking about something stupid? You know he stayed up all night thinking about this. Dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. So here's the setting in the first one. You have this perfume, this oil. When I was a boy, they only made like two kinds of men's perfume, Brute and Old Spice. You go to the mall now and they'll hose you down with 40 before you get out. But you have this perfume, this oil. And in the biblical times, perfume was used to enhance aromas, but they were also used to provide healing. The shepherd would put aromatic oils on the sheep to provide healing for wounds and also to provide defense for pests, fleas, gnats, things like that. And I said all that to say, he's talking about something that is very valuable. The perfume and the oil in that day was a very valuable resource. Remember when the woman broke the alabaster box? What a pricely sacrifice that was for her as she anointed the feet of Jesus and the perfume filled the room. But if you fail to guard, the point he's making, if you fail to guard this valuable oil, this valuable perfume, if you fail to protect it, all it takes is a few dead flies to ruin the product. Amen. All it takes, dead flies, will putrefy the perfume. What was pleasing becomes foul, and it doesn't take very much. And then he makes the correlation. So too, a person can build a good, godly reputation. A person can have a good track record and be respected and admired by their peers at church, or their peers in the community, or their peers in the company. But let just a little bit of folly come into their life, and that little bit of folly can ruin all the good they've done. Amen. Let just a little bit of, and he didn't even say sin, a little folly, a little foolishness. That's all it takes. Let a little foolishness creep in, and what was considered to be a fine, upstanding church member, pastor, employer, business owner, a little bit of folly, and they're ruined. That's all it takes. We really have to guard our reputation, because it doesn't take much to ruin your reputation. And let me tell you about people, they don't forget. The Lord will forgive, but people won't forget. It doesn't take much. And I was just writing some things down. In the last year, we have seen college football coaches who were esteemed to be well upstanding citizens, leader of young men, builder of young men, winners of national titles. And 20 seconds on a video was all it took to ruin the name. It'll never be forgotten. I thought back to when I was a boy. I never really paid much attention to politics when I was a boy. I try not to now. But there was a presidential candidate. He had a lot of momentum. Everybody thought he was going to be the guy. His name was Gary Hart. All it took was one photograph, and he was out. Never heard from him again. And it was a clean photograph. It was just a foolish photograph. So how does that apply to us? Well, we have our witness, and we have our reputation, and we have our testimony, but it only takes a little bit of foolishness for that to be soiled and stained, at least in the eyes of men and women. Amen. You know, Paul, when he writes to the church, will talk about being careful about your jokes. He will talk about being careful about coarse conversation and joking. Because all it takes is one off-color comment, and all the good you have built up will be absolutely destroyed. Got a lot quieter, didn't it? All it takes is one, and we'll talk about this in a little bit because Solomon circles back around to this. All it takes is one moment when the tongue is not guarded. And you don't have to say anything dirty or perverse. All you have to do is say the wrong thing. And you are suddenly, everything you've built up with the people you're around will be spoiled, just like dead flies spoil the perfume and the oil. Everybody that's excited, say amen. A wise man's heart, verse 2, is at his right hand, but a fool's heart at his left. Even when a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everybody that he's a fool. And I hear Solomon talking, and what I hear him saying is this: the person who is given to foolishness just can't help themselves. You can, amen, I'm preaching better than I shouting, aren't I? You can talk to them till you're blue in the face. But if they are given to foolishness, they just can't help themselves. They can't stop. It's not always that they want to be foolish. They just can't help but being foolish. Now, along with numerous number of factors and reasons. I think here's the deal. Wisdom has to be sought after. Foolishness comes natural to all of us. Amen. Amen. When you were young, nobody had to teach you how to act like a fool. And some of us still know, even now, how to do it. But when you were young, nobody had to teach you how to be foolish. When you got that driver's license, and the first time they let you take the car, nobody had to teach you to say, let's see how fast we can make it go. There ain't a person in this room that hadn't done that. Except her. She hadn't done that. No, foolishness is natural. Nobody has to teach you how to be foolish. But the thing is, wisdom has to be sought after. It has to be pursued. This is the call of the book of Proverbs. Get wisdom. Find discernment. Get good judgment. And what Solomon is noting here is that people who have not sought wisdom and not sought good judgment and not sought discernment, they are by their nature just going to make foolish choices. I can't tell you the number of people who walk in my office and say, I know I shouldn't have done it. To which I want to just stand up and say, well, why did you do it? But I can't do that because I got a whole book of things I knew I shouldn't have done. Nobody had to teach me how to make, and the thing about making foolish choices, they don't even have to teach you how to excuse foolish choices. It's natural. Because the natural man is the foolish man. The spiritual man is the one who is righteous and who chooses the way of wisdom. A man not following the ways of the Spirit to wisdom will naturally follow the way of the fool. So let me just say something here. Nothing you see people do today should surprise you. Nothing, can you believe? Yes, I can believe it. Because the flesh is given to the way of folly. And if the Spirit isn't leading, the flesh will naturally. That's what Solomon says. The wise man will go to the right and the fool's always going to go to the left. Even when he's walking down the road, you can tell. He can't help himself. Because this is the way of the flesh. Verse 4. How am I doing? Oh, all right. Verse 4. If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, this is really good. I hope you'll listen. Do not leave your post. For conciliation pacifies great offenses. Now, Solomon was the king, and he's given some real good work advice here. He's given some real good advice to everybody who's ever going to hold a job and have a superior on that job. He's given some real good advice to everybody who's ever going to get married and have a spouse who at some point is going to be mad at you. Y'all bunch of chickens. Have any of you ever worked for an angry person? An angry superior? It's a fact of life. There's always going to be people up the food chain who are like that. How do you deal with them? Solomon says, if the spirit of the ruler turns against you, here's what you do. Don't leave your post. What's he saying? Do your job. He's also saying, keep your mouth shut. Don't go to them when they're mad and say, let's talk about it. Nobody can talk when they're mad. Amen. Solomon is saying, do your job. Because if you do your job and you do your job well, that pacifies a lot of anger that leaders have toward those who are their subordinates. Just do your job. I don't know. I got a couple of Georgia fans here. I'm sorry. It's a fresh moment, I know. But I have a book, Nick Saban's Management Principles. Whether you like him or not, the man wins. And one of it, that was your cue to shout and stand up and throw a hanky and all that. But one of its principles to his players that he rehearses over and over is this: do your job. You do your job every play. And if all 11 of you are doing your job every play, nobody will beat us. If all 11 of you are doing what you are supposed to do, then our outcome will be good. Solomon is saying, when you feel that come against you, focus on what you're supposed to be doing. Do what you do. Do it so well that what you are doing pacifies the anger of the one who is angry with you. Make yourself indispensable. That's the best job advice I can give anybody. Make yourself indispensable. Work to the degree that when you're not there, everybody feels like something isn't clicking because you're not there. He's also saying this: if there's contention, don't pester him. It'll only make it worse. Don't argue with him. It'll only make it worse. Don't decide you'll go the other way and just get lazy. Well, if he's going to be like that, then I'll be like this. Yeah, I just jumped into the marriage equation there. No. Do your job. And by doing what you're supposed to do, you will eventually pacify the one for whom you report. You with me? Amen. Amen. All right. This is all very practical stuff. Now, when I look at this stuff, it becomes practical to me. So maybe that's why. Somebody may take it and really make it spiritual. Good luck with all that. Verse 5. Solomon said, there's an evil that I've seen under the sun, as an error proceeding from the ruler. When folly is set in great dignity, while the rich sit in a lowly place. He said, I've seen servants on horses, while princes walk on the grounds like servants. Now, let's stop right there. For a lot of us, that wouldn't bother us. Amen. For a lot of us, that wouldn't bother us. But Solomon said this creates a problem. It's an interesting observation. And I think he's pointing out there two issues that the reader should watch for. One, it's easy to wind up in a place you don't belong. Amen. But it's not necessarily good for you to wind up in a place you don't belong. It's in the American business world, we always think of promotion and climb up the corporate ladder and advancement and become the supervisor and become the manager. I've known a lot of people who were great workers and were horrible managers. I've known people when I had a real job, who left what we would call the trenches and went into management and quit and came back to the trenches and basically said, that's not for me. I didn't enjoy being there, and they didn't enjoy me being there. I didn't enjoy that work. This is what I am. And I hear Solomon saying that a little bit. It's easy to wind up in the wrong place. It's easy to have the role of a servant, and all of a sudden you have the opportunity to be elevated and promoted and think, that's what I want to do. You know, the further I climbed up the corporate ladder, you know what I found out? More people shoot at you the higher you climb. And you're really more exposed the higher you climb. Solomon said, I've seen servants on horses elevated and promoted, and I've seen those who were leaders pushed down into the place of servants. Now, here's a great point. Nobody will get excited, but I hope you'll think about it. Putting the wrong people in a high office position benefits no one. Putting the wrong person in a position of influence benefits no one. And I'm really trying not to say right now, consider the presidency. But anyway, I'm really trying not to say that. Because I figure there'll be online comments and you know, but I'll go back to my childhood days. Jimmy Carter. You know, we were all happy. A Southerner. A Baptist. Now, he's not Pentecostal, but he's close. And a farmer. But history might tell us that putting the wrong person, of course, we never met Billy to afterwards, putting the wrong person in the wrong office of influence benefits no one. I've worked with people who got promoted and the department went to pot. Good in one position, horrible in another. And the essence of this, it's better to be where you're supposed to be. Where you are fitted for. Where you are designed for. It's better to be there than to climb into positions of influence that are not suited for you and you are not suited for them. Amen? Amen. Second thing, he goes on and says, now he who digs a pit will fall into it. And whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. And he who quarries stones may be hurt by them. And he who splits wood may be endangered by it. Well, Pastor, what do you hear Solomon saying to us there? Be careful. Because danger lurks everywhere. Be very careful. See, when I'm looking at this, I just see a guy talking about average jobs. People dig pits. Come by here tomorrow and look over in the Family Life Center, and they will be digging. I think they've already dug the catch basin, and they're going to catch all the water that comes out of the village, and they've been digging over there for a couple of weeks. But if you've watched the news enough, here's what you should have learned. People who dig large ditches, it's not uncommon for those ditches to cave in. If they aren't careful, and you, well, what's the dig in a ditch? You know, there's a lot. It depends on how big the ditch is. People who dig ditches have to be careful because the ditch will fall in on them. The pit, they'll fall into it. Whoever breaks through a wall. Someone is tearing down a wall. Don't forget, there could be serpents, at least to his readers, who nest in the wall. Sam Teague would tell you there could be live wires inside that wall, so before you tear it down, you might want to turn the power off. People who quarry stones may be hurt by the very stones they are quarrying. People who split wood have to be careful that the wood doesn't splinter or the axe doesn't fly back the other way. And what I hear Solomon saying here is this: you may have done this job every day of your life, but don't ever lose sight that you have to keep focused on what you're doing. You have to. You can't afford a careless moment. Amen. You got to stay focused on what. Don't be careless, because there's danger lurking everywhere. When I worked at Sangamo in Pickens, it was in high school, and I had a couple of jobs. One of them was I was a quality control tester of their power factor equipment. And I would charge the big power line capacitors and test them. The average one was 7,200 volts. That was kind of the standard charge that I would do every night. 7,200 volts. And the only thing between me and 7,200 volts was this thin wall of plywood. And sometimes the capacitors would come in well over 100,000 volts. You had to charge it to full capacity and then test it. You only have to get shocked one time to remind yourself, make sure that the system is off before you go over there. Make sure that all of the breakers have tripped before you walk in there, and there were automatic breakers that tripped. And the reality is this, I think there's two things. One, we do things so often we don't think about it. Take our mind off of it and don't even realize how close we are to danger. The second thing, I think, is we tend to rush and not think. We tend to rush and not think about what we're about to do and all of the implications. So I hear Solomon saying to his workers, slow down, be careful, because danger lurks everywhere. Verse 10, and this is the one I loved. If the axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength. But wisdom brings success. Now, I will pick on the younger generation here, because the last thing they want to do is get their tools ready before they use them. What do you want me to do? I want you to chop this wood. They don't look at the axe to see if it's sharp. They grab it and they start swinging. And of course, with youth, you can swing for a long time, before it starts to hurt. You get old enough, you figure out it's a whole lot better to take a few minutes and sharpen that axe than it is to try to swing a dull blade. Is anybody with me? So what's Solomon saying? He's saying it's better to work smart than to work hard. And he's also saying it's better to live smart than to live hard. A few blows with a sharp axe is far more effective than a whole lot of blows with a dull blade. I've been in state council the last 2 days. I've heard things that would curl your hair, literally. But one of them was we were talking about Christmas Eve, and Pastor Madden, you having a Christmas Eve service? Yeah, we are. We're going to have Christmas Eve, 11 o'clock. Oh, you're just doing one? I said, yeah, just 11 o'clock, one service. Everybody wants to come. Well, I heard of a church that's doing 5 and another one that's doing 7. I said, well, tell them have a real good time. While they wear out their staff and exhaust their people, I would rather have one good service than swing the blade 7 times. And it's you can have 5, 6, 7 services, but at what expense? What's it costing you? And the great lesson is we tend to run into things unprepared of the impact. And so Solomon is saying, get the tools and get the equipment and make sure it's all in working order. Make sure everything's in order, because you can get more done doing it right than you can ever get done just swinging without effective equipment or people. Anybody hearing me? Okay, let's keep going. The plight of the foolish, verse 11. A serpent may bite when it is not charmed. I do not plan to find out. The babbler is no different, because the words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. The words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and at the end of his talk, he is raving madness. A fool also multiplies words. Now, no man knows what is to be. Who can tell him what will be after him? The labor of fools wearies them, for they do not even know how to go into the city. Listen to what he says. The serpent who is not charmed. We've all seen these images in the Middle East of snake charmers. And they charm the cobras and all that stuff. And I like watching that on video. I have no desire to see it in person, because I don't trust them. But let that charmer get a snake who has not been charmed. And it doesn't matter how well he blows that flute. As Louis Grizzard would say, that snake's going to bite you. There's a good chance the serpent who hasn't been charmed is going to bite. And Solomon uses that analogy to reveal to us the plight of the fool. The fool who has not yet tamed his tongue, but opens his mouth to speak. He can't help but indict himself. His words will bite him. His own words will bite him. Solomon says, and the crazy thing is he just goes on and on. You ever heard somebody like that? Come on, don't look at them right now. They just start and they can't stop. I flash back to teenage days when I got caught. I know, I'm the only one. But those times you thought you got away with it and you didn't get away with it and you got caught. Right? And here you are trying to explain it. And the best thing you could say is nothing. But you know what you did? You rambled, and you rambled, and you rambled. And the more you talked, the more you indicted yourself. Anybody listening? You all know that our youngest son, most of you know, he's a Greenville County deputy. And he will tell you, just let them talk. We just let them talk, because sooner or later, if they're guilty, they'll tell us. They'll tell us. This is what Solomon's pointing out. The fool who can't tame his tongue, his own words will start to bite. His words will go on and on. He says it'll start out with foolishness and it'll end up with madness. The words will multiply. They will get wearisome. I pulled in a couple of Proverbs here because I thought they were fitting. In the multitude of words, sin is not lacking. But he who restrains his lips is wise. Mark Twain and Abe Lincoln both are given credit for this quote, but it's actually Solomon in Proverbs who said, even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace. When he shuts his lips, he is considered perceptive. A foolish person will talk themselves into madness. We had one of the committees I'm on. We meet with preachers who have fallen, and the goal is restoration. And so during all of COVID, we were doing a lot of this via Zoom, and we had a meeting with a man who there was accusations between him and his wife wasn't available to talk to us. So, you ask him well, what about this? And all he had to say was, didn't happen, or wasn't that bad, or something like that. 25 minutes later, somebody's car alarm's going off. 25 minutes later, he's still talking. And some of the other guys are sending me text messages, because we're on Zoom. And I just started texting them back. In the multitude of words, sin is not lacking. The more he talks, the more he's putting a noose around his own neck. That's the way of the foolish person. Where Solomon says that the wise thing for us to do is learn to guard our tongue. Better to be silent and people wonder if you're a fool than to open your mouth and prove it. Verses 16 through 19, and then I'm done. I think. I hope so. I'm breaking a sweat up here. This is really interesting too. No, we got verse 20. These are proverbs on rulers and laziness. Listen to what he says. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your princes feast in the morning. Blessed are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobles, and your princes feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. Because of laziness, the building decays, and through idleness of hands, the house leaks. A feast is made for laughter, and wine makes merry, but money answers everything. I wouldn't know. I've heard that's true. And here's what Solomon is saying. It's better to have someone who is prepared to lead than to put a foolish rookie who is not prepared and doesn't understand responsibility. Amen. I could talk about the church as a whole. It's better to have someone who is prepared to lead than to put someone who is not prepared and doesn't understand the responsibility. Better to have someone who understands, as Dr. Kahn talked to us one time, talked to the elders, and one of his leadership principles is this: fast before you feast. Do the work you need to do. There'll be time to celebrate later. But there are people who come into certain positions and it's all about the feast and never about the fast. Childishness. It's really sad to have someone in leadership who acts in childish ways. Well, I might as well get out on this limb. Y'all staring at me. I mentioned the current president earlier. I can talk about President Trump because I voted for him twice. Now I'm really going to get people mad at me. I agreed with most of his policies. Certainly his religious liberties and his friendship with the church I appreciated, and I agreed with most of his policies. But I hated the times he acted like a child. And I really think that's probably why he's not in office today. If he ever could have gotten away from that, I don't even know that an election could be stolen from him. I'm not saying it was. Come on, send those emails, fire them off. Already got you mad at me. I'm going to get them about the vaccine and the booster, and I said this about him, I said this about him. Well, he has to say, no. You know, Reagan never said those things. He had good policies. But he never let himself get childish in his conversation and his actions. When a leader gets childish, everybody they lead suffers because of their childishness. Wherever it is. In a marriage, when a husband or a wife gets childish, everybody in the house suffers. Amen. I'm preaching pretty good right now. In the church, let a pastor or an elder start acting childish. Everybody suffers. Solomon says, woe to you, land, when your king's a child And he acts like a child. And he wakes up every morning and wants chocolate for breakfast. Bless you. Woe to you. Blessed are you when your king understands the responsibility. Understands there is a time to feast, but you feast for strength, not for drunkenness. Yeah. And then he goes on. He says, woe to you, because here's the other thing you need to know. A little bit of laziness and everything will decay. The only thing it would take for these buildings to go into decay is for us not to do anything to keep them up. Amen. Amen. This building we will celebrate 25 years next summer in this building. And that's hard for people. People say, really? It doesn't look 25 years old. Well, there's a reason it doesn't look 25 years old. Because we spend a lot of money and Shane and his team do a lot of work. All you got to do is get lazy. You know, Proverbs will talk about a little folding of the hands, a little closing of the eyes, and poverty will come upon you. That's all it takes. Doesn't take anything. Just a little bit of laziness, Solomon says. Just a little bit of laziness, the building will decay. A little bit of idleness, and your house will start leaking. How many times, ladies, has something happened to the structure of your home, and your husband said, you know, I meant to. Come on, ladies, this is your chance. I've been meaning to. And okay, you didn't answer. How many times, men, has something happened to your house and you realized that your wife had been telling you? Got one. I told you better take care of that. I told you that needed to be fixed. I got this. All of you online, I have the most frightened bunch of worshipers here tonight. It doesn't take much for things to go to pot. It doesn't take much at all. Verse 20, and I'm done. Whew. Ready? He said, do not curse the king, even in your thoughts. Do not curse the rich, even in your bedroom. For a bird of the air may carry your voice, and a bird in flight may tell the matter. You would say, now, what? That sounds ridiculous. Well, here's what he's saying. Be careful what you say, because there are no secrets. And most of the time, what you say is never reported as you say it. I'd go one step further. Be careful what you listen to. Because just listening to someone who is bashing someone else, and you will become tied to the bashing whether you said a word or not. As a matter of fact, a lot of times the basher will tell someone else that you were bashing with them. And you were just standing there trying to pray for them. Be careful what you say, because there are no secrets. Be careful what you listen to. You know, Proverbs don't make us want to get up and run and shout. But I'll promise you this, if you apply a proverb to your life every day, you'll live a better life. You'll have more godly influence, and people will respect you and honor you and marvel at your testimony. Amen. So, Lord, thank you for your word. Practical though it may be. And I love the practicality of it, Lord, because we all have jobs and we all have homes. And we all have places of influence. And you give us instructions on how we can do well in those places and live honorably for you. Help us to apply them to our lives. I pray you'll bless us this week and prepare us for Sunday as we celebrate the birth of Christ. Men and women and boys and girls who come into this sanctuary, perhaps not knowing you, may they leave believing that you are truly the Son of God. And let the words of our mouths and meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. God bless you. Have a great night. See you Sunday morning.